Hello, everybody. It is Saturday morning, and it is time for the Reef Automation live stream. This is number 3 that we're doing today, and we've had a number of people ask for a couple different topics. So today I'm going to go over a number of different specific topics that people have been asking for. Um, and we're going to also go over how my Reefbot's been doing, how my Trident's been doing. We had a couple people ask me to quote unquote review both of those products. I don't generally review products, but I will go over what I've experienced with both of them and see what people think of how I've been using it. And I will, of course, ask any programming or answer any programming questions and go over any advanced programming that anybody might have today. We've had a couple people ask a couple questions this week, and I'm going to go over specifics to those questions. So anyway, we're going to start with going over backups and restores. A lot of people are either have a Apex Classic or Apex Junior and are looking to upgrade. We also have people that are having have a newer Apex and maybe their Apex goes down. Maybe there's an issue with it and they have to replace it. And we're going to kind of go over a little bit of how this is all done. Um, in my system, I upgraded to a Classic and it took me about 3 hours to get everything back up, seeing as I have so many different modules that I have to control, and that's usually the biggest concern for most people. So, anyway, as I said, I have an Apex, the standard unit, so we're going to go through where all of that is. So, if you go into Fusion, you'll notice that there is a setup icon here. However, when you go into Fusion, all you can really do here is adjust the feed modes. You can adjust how long your data logs are. We went over how the power monitoring works in a previous stream. You can change the sound that your alarm makes through the display. And that's all you can do from Apex Fusion. So in order to get into the backup section, you actually have to log in specifically to your Apex through the IP address of the unit itself. Um, I have a little bit of a different thing here, but basically you'll log in using your IP address, and then you'll get into the Apex controller, which looks very similar to Fusion, but is very different. You are directly connecting to the unit. So there's a number of positives here. The first thing you'll notice is that it has a completely different dashboard than my Fusion dashboard. So my Fusion dashboard, which is what I connect to on my phone, um, and I connect to on my iPad, or I connect, outside of the house, and it has all the most important things. My Apex Local or Direct has all of my sensors. It has all of my probes, and it has all of my leak sensors. So this way I can get a first glance perfect look at everything right off the bat. It also shows, I also can have my maintenance turned on and off here in case, let's say, Fusion was down. I can turn on maintenance, and I can check all of my sensors here. Um, what I was getting to was the pros of the controller is the latency of these numbers. I've calculated to be almost immediate. And what I mean by that is Fusion has roughly a 30-second to minute, I would say, latency till you actually get the particular number that it actually is. So for instance, my salt right now is showing 34.8. Now if I go over local here, if this was to change 34.8 to whatever, this is going to come in first, and then your Fusion about a minute or two later will show up. Now, this is important when you're doing testing or you're doing your sensor testing, or let's say you're dosing something and you need to see what the pH is immediately. Um, I would say it's more for the sensors, which we're going to go over. If you need to know if your sensor is working and you need to dip it in water, let's say, test it, Fusion's going to give you a 30-second to minute delay, and therefore you're not going to know if your sensor's working. You're going to think it's broken. So having the controller right up in front of you here gives you the ability to see it right off the bat and almost immediately. So another big key to it is if you go to the setup here, this has a few more options up here than Fusion. So if we go over here in Fusion, you will notice that those two settings are missing. It gives you everything else, but it doesn't give you these two settings here. One of which is the load and save feature. So this is where you're able to save your complete Apex system in case of a catastrophe. So I generally save my Apex every weekend. I actually remember to save it every weekend because I do so many different things to my fish tanks that I save my all the time. For general users, I recommend if you're going to make adjustments to save it after every adjustment. Um, I have one Apex running 3 fish tanks. Like I said, I have about 30 something modules. I have a ton of sensors. I got tons of programming. If I was to lose this, it would take me quite a long time to get everything back. So this is where you save or load your Apex. Now, saving's easy. You just hit save and you hit save configuration and it downloads it to your computer. You notice I say computer. You can't save the configuration from a phone. You also can't save it from an iPad. Um, I have tried to do it and it doesn't work. So you have the load apex, which is the opposite, obviously. This is what, let's say you made a change and you screwed something up and you needed to load back. You can load back specific portions of the configuration. So, for instance, let's say you screwed up one of your probe names or you screwed up something with your probes. You just click on probe names, get your file, load configuration, everything gets back to what it was. So this is how you back up and restore a brand new 2016 or above Apex unit. So a lot of people would like to know how to get the Classic onto here. Unfortunately, if you back up your Classic and you try to load it to the new one, it will not work. So what I recommend for people that have Classic is going to your dashboard, and there is an XML feature. I don't have a Classic here, so I can't, unfortunately, I can't demonstrate it. But there is an XML formatting portion on the Classic that lets you export all of your programming settings. And then what you have to actually do, the right way to do it, is to take everything that's in your Classic, unplug it all, and then go to your new Apex. Do not plug anything in. Get it all running, get it up and get everything labeled, get it working before you plug any of the probes or any of the configuration. You will have to recalibrate all your probes because they're going to be calibrated from the new unit. After you do that, though, my recommendation is to plug in each one of your Aquabus devices one at a time. So, for instance, if you have a couple feeders, let's say, or you have PM1s or PM2s, you're going to plug each one in one at a time. You're going to plug it in, you're going to go to your dashboard, set it up. Next, plug in the next one. Plug it in, go to the next one, set it up. And then if you have copied your programming from your old Apex, your Classic, you're going to take that programming, you're just going to copy and paste it in. And that is how, unfortunately, you have to do it with a Classic to a new one. Like I said, it took me about 3 hours. Again, I have probably a lot more than most people in terms of devices. I have 34 different Apex devices. So, like I said, what I did is I plugged in one thing at a time, and then I configured it one thing at a time. I updated it one thing at a time. Once it's done though, save your configuration and then you're good to go. So does anybody have any questions about that before we continue? That's backing up and restoring Apex Classic and 2016 models. Took you 8 hours to upgrade the new Apex. Holy cow. Yeah, I think if you um, get the XML file, copy it to your computer, and just copy and paste, it makes it so much easier. Um, so the local Apex, you will just type in your IP address of your Apex. So mine, I believe, is 192.90, I believe, and that'll get you to your local Apex. That's it. Again, it has a separate dashboard. It has a whole separate configuration. There's a number of extra features that it provides you. I apologize, I failed to show you the other thing that it gives you. Seasonal. So if you go to your setup here, it gives you the seasonal tab, which is really kind of neat. I don't use a lot of this, but what is really cool is you can actually use seasons, actual seasons that are from your um, astronomical clock, and it will actually give you your sunset, your sunrise for every day of the month, and this is where you can adjust it if you wanted to. I don't use any of this stuff, but it's kind of cool. Some people use it for lighting, moon, specifically moon, to simulate the actual moon, full moon and half moon and whatnot. I don't use it though. How do you find out where to get your local Apex? So the way to do it is, I believe in Fusion, it shows you. Um, if you go to Fusion and Information and you go to, let's see where it is. It might be actually in here. There you go. So I will do that again. So you go to the Wi-Fi little icon right here, and there is your IP address right there. That's how you get your IP address. If you don't know it. And then that'll get you into the local controller. So, any other questions about backing up? I wish I had a classic here, but I don't any longer to go over kind of classic stuff. But there's an XML tab on there, and then you will export your XML programming, and that will allow you to then, like I said, copy and paste. For me, it took, like I said, about 3 hours. I wish they had a better way of doing it, but unfortunately they don't right now. Um, but yeah, updating from a new one is much easier. So, so the next thing I wanted to discuss, I've had a number of people ask about is sensors. So I have a ton of sensors on my system. Um, if you go in here, I will kind of give you an idea of how many FMMs I have. I have one FMM here, one here, one here, one FMM here, one FMM here, one FMM here, another FMM here. I probably have, what, 6 or 7 FMMs. Each FMM will support up to 4 sensors. So If you're not familiar with the different things you can plug into the FMM, we're going to go over each one. Um, and what I like about the FMM is it's very don't know the word. It's universal, so you could use it for a number of different things. I use it for flow sensors. I use it for leak sensors. I use it for optical sensors. I also use it for um, the uh, solenoid valves. I use it for a number of different things. So if you're unfamiliar with the FMM, it has 4 ports, which are the sensors. It has one 24-volt port, and then it has your power supply. So how this works is if you want to use the 24-volt supply on the FMM, see if I can get in here a little bit, to power something, you must plug in the power to the right of it. This will not work unless you plug the power in. You can, however, use the FMM with just the Aquabus to utilize the optical or the sensor plugs. So again, you can use the Aquabus and use the sensors, but if you wish to use the 24-volt ACC accessory plug, you must power it. Okay, so we have flow sensors. I have a couple sensors here, which we can go over. I have a flow sensor on my my scrubber, on my fish tank algae scrubber. So this way I'm able to know specifically what the flow is going into my algae scrubber. So this is the sensor here. I have a sensor on my return as well. So here's my return sensor. Pretty much the same all the time. These dips are when I went into maintenance mode or I updated the firmware. So this is the sensors that I have plugged into my FMMs. Um, let's see. So I got one here. I got another sensor on my UV, which I think is essential. If you ever have a UV, to have a sensor on there. So those are sensors, and to set them up, you would go into your probes and you would go into your sensors, which are flow sensor right here, and you can adjust a number of things on here. You can adjust um, the alarm for it, so if it goes above a certain gallon per hour or below, just like any other probe, just like a pH probe or a temperature probe, you can adjust your alarms here. The FMMs have their own configuration as well, which if we go to them, I usually just click them on auto detect, and then you can, of course, if you want to do liters per hour, if you're not here in the United States, you can also specifically tell what sensor goes into what. I just put auto detect and it automatically does it. The Apex username and password is the same as your Fusion password. So you can change that to whatever you want, of course. But it's usually admin, I think, out of the box, or admin1234 out of the box. But it's the same password as Fusion. So there's your flow sensors. The next thing you can plug into your FMMs is optical sensors. Now, if you guys have been watching my streams in the past, you will know that I have a lot of optical sensors. I really enjoy the optical sensors that Apex makes. I think they work really well. I've had a lot of people complain about them. And one thing to know about the optical sensors is don't put them by the dosing pumps. Don't put them by anything that will gather any type of bubbles. Don't put them near, for instance, a kalkwasser input. they will stop working if they get any type of calcification on them. So make sure where you put them, you're not getting any type of calcification. Don't put them next to any type of algae. Um, don't put them in the refugium, for instance. Um, don't put them near a bunch of bubbles. I've noticed that the bubbles kind of mess them up. So I have two RO units, which I will grab a picture of here so you can see them. And I will explain kind of how I use my sensors in a number of different fashions. So give me one moment and I will bring that up so you can see my sensor arrangement. Okay, so you will see that I have a sensor right here in the middle. I have a sensor up top, and if you look really closely, I know it's a little blurry, there's a sensor in the back. So I have three sensors here. So this is my auto top off. So instead of using the ATK or instead of using any type of pre-made float sensor and switch, I use these float sensors. So there's my auto top off, which is the middle, which when that gets low, I just have my pump turn on, fill it up. I have a high sensor just to alert me in case there was any reason for the water to get high. It'll send me a signal. And I also have a low sensor back there to tell me if the sump was to get low. Um, I recommend that everybody has a low sensor and a high sensor if you're going to use sensors. I think it's essential for anyone to know the water level of your sump. So that's one thing I use sensors for. I think I use sensors for my auto top off containers as well, which I will pull up a picture. Give me one moment. Okay, so you will see I have two FMMs back here, right in the back. This is where I have my liter meters as well. And I have a high sensor in my salt bin, and I have a high sensor in my fresh bin, and I have a low sensor in my salt bin and a low sensor in my fresh bin. And they get plugged into the FMMs back here. I ended up drilling a hole in here and mounting them. I think that works the best. I find that the sensors, by the way, work the best when they are horizontally mounted and not vertically mounted. And what I mean by that is if you recall the picture before, you'll notice that all of my sensors are indeed mounted horizontally. I find that to work the best. So I have a high sensor here, I have a low sensor here, I have a high sensor here, I have a low sensor here. Now, let's see what else. I'm trying to remember. There's just so many sensors. So in every one of my fish tanks, in all three of my fish tanks, I have a high and a low sensor. I have a auto top off sensor, and I can use those for anything in the programming. I can use those for water exchanges. I can use them for auto top off. I can use them for alerts. I can use them for whatever I'd like to use them for. So I think the sensors, the optical sensors, are very versatile. I don't think float sensors work as well. I noticed that those get stuck quite a bit. Specifically for what I'm using them for, I need them to be very accurate, and I've been using those sensors for since the FMM came out, so 3+ years. I've never had one fail on me. Again, it's essential that you don't have them near any type of dosing lines. How are you mounting them in your sump? So I am mounting them. If you get the kit, the optical sensor kit, they come with these little magnets. You see? I'm using the same magnet here to mount my salinity probe right here. I think I can actually show you. So you'll see that this is the OS1. Now if you search on, well, let's say bulk reef supply, and you search for the OS1, they come in a kit, so you can actually get the OS1 with the mount, with the magnet mount. So that's how I'm doing them. I don't use the magnets in my sump container like I mentioned, or my RO and salt container. I actually drilled the hole. You could also drill the hole in the sump if you wanted to. Just know it's going to be obviously permanent, which I didn't know that where I'd have these. I don't know. Um, I don't know if I'm going to move these at some point. Maybe I get a bigger return pump. I think it's essential that you have magnets there in the sump and not drill them in unless you're really certain that they're going to stay there. Yeah, I can show you my program on my ATS or ATO. It's quite simple, actually. There's really not much to it. Yeah, so Peter, you can get the ATK kit. It's not a bad kit. Um, you'll notice I'm not using a float for my auto top off. I use peristaltic liter meter pumps for everything, so they're generally not going to overflow my sump. And again, I have a high sensor that will automatically shut it off, and if that doesn't shut it off, it's going to alert me. Um, what's nice about the ATK is it does have a float sensor, so there is that extra protection. I do have float, not sensors, sorry, float switch. I do have float switches inside both of my containers, my fresh and salt containers, so that way those don't overflow. Um, but I do really like the optical sensors that Apex makes. Um, so you want to see the auto top off programming, so I can show you that. So it's pretty easy. So this is my low sensor. This is my high sensor. So basically, how I have it is if the low sensor is open, meaning that it has lost water, it's going to turn on my auto top off pump. Once it gets to the high sensor, it's going to close. The rest of these are leak sensors. So and we're going to go over leak sensors in a second, but this is in case something was to leak, it's going to turn off my auto top off because it could be coming from the auto top off. So that way I would turn it off. We went over when last week. So the when statement indicates if my auto top off pump's been pumping and it's been on for 5 minutes, it's going to shut it off. Generally, that means that there's low water. There could be something wrong with the pump. This will alert me, of course, because I use it with the error command, which we went over last week. So this will tell me if my ATK has been on for more than 5 minutes, and it'll alert me. So that's what the when statement. The output reef maintenance. So when I turn on my reef maintenance, it shuts off my ATK. I have it deferring for 30 minutes. Now, there's a reason I have this for 30 minutes because of how I'm doing my auto water change system between my two fish tanks. So if you recall, I think I went over this last week, I have two fish tanks that are sharing water. The fact that they're sharing water indicates that one of the tanks, meaning my larger tank, is going to have a low water level. So I don't want my my ATO to turn on for 30 minutes, meaning it's going to wait for that water change to be completely done before it fills up the water. I generally recommend a defer of about a minute to 2 minutes on a general system. Now what that means is that this float sensor here has to show that it doesn't have water for more than the amount of time that's here. So water goes down, the sensor's above the water, it says, okay, I haven't seen water for 2 minutes, turn on. And that's what the defer statement at the bottom here does. So that's my auto top off for my Reef. On my 300, I have an auto top off system as well, and I also have one in my office tank. And the fish auto top off is very similar, except for you'll notice I don't have that gigantic defer of 30 minutes because I'm not sharing water between the two of them. But it's generally the same thing. So hopefully that explains my ATO programming. So optical sensors, awesome. I think you could do a lot of things with the optical sensors. You can do auto water change with optical sensors. You can do just alerts in general. If you want to know if the water's too high, if you want to know if there's water overflowing, you can just have an optical sensor at the top of your fish tank that says, hey, the water started rising, which is great. So next thing, leak sensors. So we get a lot of questions about leak sensors. So what I like about the Apex leak sensors is they make two different ones. They make the low, or the, I don't know what to call it, the low profile, I guess, sensor, and the heavy profile, or the larger one. So I use the solid surfaces. They're about this thick and they're heavy, so they don't move as easily. So I think that's really great for most people that aren't putting these, as they say here, under carpets, or if you're putting them just by the sumps. They're nice and heavy. They stick. They won't go anywhere. I really like them. They're large. They're probably about that big. So you're going to be able to get water pretty much anywhere near the sump. So I have a leak sensor underneath my containers. I have a leak sensor by both my sump on the right and left side. I have a leak sensor near my chiller. I have a I have so many leak sensors. I've lost count of all of them, but they are essential to have if you have a lot of stuff going on like I do. So again, these are FMM compatible, so they plug right into the FMM. Now, there is something before we go on the bottom of all of the apexes, which is called the I/O, or the breakout box. Now, a lot of people use these for doing leak sensors, optical sensors, buttons. You'll see a number of people making their own special controllers that are basically contact closures. So all they're doing is they're just kind of like a doorbell. So if you go to Home Depot and you get a doorbell, there's two connections on it. Once those connect to each other, which is the push of the doorbell, it'll do something. So the breakout box is called an I/O, meaning it's an input or an output, which will send something, or you can trigger something such as a button. So you'll notice on all of the apexes there is they call it a DIN plug, which is right here, this guy. And then you buy this breakout box and you can plug in doorbells, like I said, or you can plug in any sort of sensor. They sell leak sensors for this. They sell optical sensors for this. So you can get away from doing the FMM completely and just buying one of these breakout boxes. And then you can pretty much do whatever you want. There's a couple people that make some really cool breakout box components. If you go on like eBay, like they make something like this. So again, this gets plugged into the Apex, and then it will do a series of events based off of the switches. And Rob says, except for I believe the EL does have an I/O connection on the bottom, and I will confirm right now, but I'm almost positive it has it. Yep, there it is, the I/O port on the EL. So that's what you would use the breakout box for. And again, there's all these companies and people making all kinds of interesting push button things, and that's what that's for. The programming for that, I don't use those, would be under probes. Everything, or not under probes, under sensors. So you were going to look for switch, and they are usually labeled something like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. These are the DIN modules right here. And you can know because it'll say digital switch on the Apex base unit. So this is where you would control or program, hey, if switch 1 does something, do this. And that's where the breakout boxes come in. And that's where these really cool, there's tons of them. You go online and they're not that expensive. This one's a little bit pricey. But, there's all kinds of different ones I've seen. I think Bulk Reef Supply showed one the other day. but that's just an example of one. Here's another breakout box. It's a little bit cheaper. Here's another one, $14 for this guy selling it on Etsy. You know, here's another one, $75. But anyway, you get the point. That's what the I/O control does, and that's what the switch does. So I think it's cool. I don't. I use my phone for everything, so I don't really see a need to have a button. But I've seen people do it, like do a button that does maintenance mode or a button that does feed mode. So we get a couple people doing that. So let's go back to the FMM here. So I use the solenoid valves for a lot of things. I don't believe I showed that in the last picture. So let me open up my pictures again and I can show you. All right. So you'll see I have two solenoid valves right here. So I have these plugged in to the FMMs. Now again, if you're using the FMM for any type of power, such as a solenoid valve, you would need the power supply with it. You cannot power anything from the 24 volt without the power supply. So you'll see right here, it needs to have the power supply. So once you use the power supply, you'll notice a little Y adapter here. And one of my solenoid valves goes to one of my containers, and one of my other solenoid valves goes to my other container. So I can have it fill from one RO unit based on the solenoid opening, which is also based off of the optical high and low sensors like I was discussing earlier. So that's how I have it fill on the solenoid valves. You can use solenoids for anything. You can use solenoids for auto top off if you wanted to. Um, I don't recommend it, but you could put a solenoid valve here on your RO system and have it open when you want to have the ATO fill water and close. So you wouldn't even need a container. I'd never recommend that, but you could essentially use that for that. Um, of course, they have the PMP pump that gets plugged into the FMM as well if you just need a pump. Pretty much anything that's 24 volts you can plug into this thing. So I have plugged in whatever's 24 volts. I'm trying to remember what I plugged in there that's 24 volts. Um, let's see. Oh, one of my liter meter pumps. Those little liter meter pumps are 12 volts. So I actually converted them from 24 to 12 and used the FMM power here to power my liter meter pump. So again, 12 volts. I think it's 12 volt 1 amp. So anything below 12 volt 1 amp you can power with the FMM. And I've used it for that. So any questions on leak sensors, optical sensors, um, and so forth, like we've discussed. So Amazon, you can convert 12 volt to or 24 to 12 volt pretty easily. Um, so you just type in 24 to 12 volt converter, and there you go, $9. It just converts it down to 12. So if you have something that's 12 volt, um, works great. Uh, always check for the max current. Make sure the max current doesn't exceed. Well, in this case, it'd be 1 amp, like I was saying, but make sure it doesn't exceed the amperage. But this is what I use. It's really, really easy. You just plug one power supply um, on one side, you plug in the pump or whatever to the other. So that's how you use that. So any additional questions on that? All right, let's see. So the next thing I wanted to discuss was the Trident. And in the same conversation, we're going to talk about the Reefbot. Um, for those that don't know me, I've had the Reefbot before I bought the Trident because it came out before the Trident, and I try to do just about everything you can with the Reefbot and go through a number of tests to see what I would find, um, pros and cons with the device. And unfortunately, I ran into a number of problems with the Reefbot, and I'm noticing that more and more people have been also running into the same problems. Um, we're gonna go over like I said, the Trident, how it's hooked up, how it works, how I feel about it, and then like I said, we're gonna go over the Reefbot, and why I personally don't like it. Um, there's been a number of conversations between many people, many different streams, many different product reviews that love the Reefbot. But like I said, we're going to go over, I'm going to be as honest as I can about it and explain to you my opinion of the Reefbot. Like I said, um, more of a review, but you know, I don't like to review products. Anyway, Trident. So, some of you out there have a Trident, some of you have used a Trident. So understand a couple things on the I'm sorry, have used the Trident, um, and understand how it works. But we're going to kind of go over my best way of using it. So my Trident is hooked up in such a way that my waistline goes outside. So I have it going, to a outside receptacle to a drain. So therefore, I don't have to worry about it ever having an issue with the drain. I'm sorry, the wastewater. So that's the one thing I always recommend to people that are interested in getting a Trident is depending on how many tests you do, you're going to get a lot of the wastewater out of that thing. You'll see I have it scheduled for 4 tests. I don't find it once you've tuned in your alkalinity through whatever means, through your 2-part or through your calcium reactor. I'm testing every 6 hours. You can test this thing every hour. You can test it every 2 hours. Um, I have found that if you test it more frequently, it is less precise. I don't know why that is. I have contacted Apex. I'm going to actually show you this. You will see that when you actually test at an interval of, let's say this is 2 hours, the precision is just not there. Look at this. So 8.5, 8.2, 8.5, 8.2, 8.5, 8. It's pretty much a pattern. However, the pattern is off by 2 to 0.2 to 0.3 dkh. So I found that making it every 6 hours, every 4 hours seems to eliminate that precision. And you will see as I get to the later steps here that things are a lot closer than they were when I was testing, at such a tight interval. Rob, I don't think you can do that. I have tried running a 12-volt power supply through the FMM, and the FMM shuts off. So I believe you have to run a 24 through it. When you run it through it, you take out the 24 and then you convert it at the output. And done. And I think it has something to do with the FMM actually has to turn it on and off. And you couldn't just run the 12 volt through it because I believe you have something in there that the Aquabus is telling it to turn on. So to your question, Peter, you can't test calcium and magnesium at such a tight interval, even if you wanted to. The Trident won't let you. But you will notice that the calcium is extremely more steady and the magnesium is extremely more steady. So it's specifically related to the alkalinity that I'm noticing the tighter, uh, if you do it every hour or every 2 hours, there's some weird fluctuation. I have no idea why it does this, so I'm still waiting on an answer from Apex to find out why it does this. But if you ever get a Trident, I highly recommend that you keep it at 4-6 hours. So yes, your variances are correct, Aaron. However, I want to kind of go over this real in depth, that the variances within the 2 hour period are always the same. So I don't believe it is from consumption just based on that factor. Within the 2 hour period, my alkalinity is not going to go down 0.2 and it is not going to go up 0.3 in a 2 hour period. And when you're using a calcium reactor, using dosing, the pattern wouldn't be as as precise as this is. Let's just put it that way. You can see that 0.47 within a 2 hour period is the same. You see that? So it would be weird to say that consumption is to go down 0.2, then point up, then 0.2 specifically, but I highly doubt that's actually happening. So there is something mechanically wrong with the Trident at the really tight scheduling. And it could be just my Trident. I don't know if anybody else experiences that. I encourage anybody that has a Trident to try it and see if they experience that up and down at such a tight schedule. It's quite strange. I notice that the high number is always the correct number, so I just completely ignore the bottom number. So wastewater, I recommend you don't have a container for that. You'd be surprised how fast that fills. And you always want to put the incoming water line to somewhere where there's 0 bubbles. So I have mine literally sitting in my overflow right now, where it is extremely calm. I have the tube all the way at the bottom of the overflow, where there's almost no um, bubbles at all, and that seems to work great for me. Some people would put it in the sump. If you're gonna put it in the sump, I'd put it right before the return line, and it works out really well for the Trident. I can tell you that I bought the Trident the day it came out. I waited up late at night on BRS and bought one the day it came out, and I can tell you with absolute certainty it works great. I don't have any problems with it, other than these little fluctuation things that I just showed you. The reagent's extremely easy to replace. It doesn't take very long. For those that have a Trident, I'm sure you can attest to how great it is. It's very accurate. Every time that I send an ICP test, I correspond the test with the Trident at the exact same time I remove the water. So that way I can see how off or on it is. And the magnesium, calcium, and alkalinity numbers I get from ICP are within zero point 0.05. I mean, the calcium is almost within 1 or 2 ppm from the ICP test. So I can tell you with certainty that the Trident is very accurate. Most of the people that have problems with the Trident either don't have the line where it needs to be. It needs to be in a bubbleless environment, like I said. And a lot of people that have trouble with the Tridents just, you know, they have their doser pump right where the inlet is. I mean, that's not going to work. So Brian, I wish I was part of their testing team. I've spoke to Terrence about it. They do have a beta testing team, and when we get to the Reefbot here in a few minutes, I'm going to explain all of the things that I've done with the Reefbot. Um, I everything I buy, I test. I test everything on it because unfortunately, in my line of work as a home automation programmer and as an audio video person that's been doing it for 20 years, you might buy a product that says, "Hey, we do Dolby Digital," and then you plug it in and it doesn't do Dolby Digital. So I am all about testing every aspect of every product. If something says it's going to do something and it doesn't do it, I call them out on it, which we're going to go through that here in the Reefbot. Um, Peter, I have the line in my overflow box of my tank. I have it all the way at the bottom of the overflow box. I have a innovative marine 100 INT, which I'll bring up a picture of it so you can see if you're not familiar with that model. And I will show you where I put it. I don't believe I have a picture of it right now, but um, of the line, I have a picture of the tank. Just give me one moment here. So that's my tank, and my overflow box in this tank is all the way across the back. So I have the line literally, if you can see the mouse cursor, I have it literally sitting at the bottom of this corner of the overflow. There is almost no turbulence there. There is absolutely zero bubbles there. Um, and that is actually where I have my Reefbot line as well. I have it in the same place. I found that is the best place for my Trident. Anywhere in the sump, there's too much turbulence. Um, if I could, which I can't, unfortunately, that's where I put my salinity probe, way back there. So what's nice, Brian, is there's these inside this tank. I don't know if there's a picture of it. Um, yeah, this doesn't really have it either. There is dividers inside here. So the line literally just kind of tucks into the divider and it goes all the way to the bottom. Maybe one day I'll take a picture of it so you can see it. So I find, again, a lot of people have success with it in the sump, but make sure there's almost no bubbles, the lightest amount of flow. You will find that your Trident is extremely accurate. All right. Any questions on the Trident? I didn't really want to go over too much of it. If you haven't seen it in action, it's extremely quiet. You know, it used to be a little louder. Now it's very quiet. Um, it works. I don't know what else to say. Um, Now on to the Reefbot, unless we have any questions about the Trident. Because I'm going to go over a lot of stuff on the Reefbot, unfortunately. Okay, let's see. So, the Reefbot. So I'm going to start by saying that it's a product that can be good. It probably could be very good. However, there's a lot of problems with it. And I know that people have went online and have given us a lot of positive reviews on the product and have unfortunately kind of skewed what's really happening with the device. I'm going to be as honest as I can about it and go through what I have experienced with it. And I will let people make their own decision whether or not they ever want to buy one. I noticed, Peter, you have one or had one or you've removed it. I don't know what you've done, but you could probably attest to everything I'm about to say. So the first thing about the Reefbot is it gets shipped from Lebanon. If you order them from direct, which is what I did. It takes roughly 2, 3, 4 weeks to get it here to the United States. Um, so I think that in itself is disconcerting, because if you ever have a problem with it, it's hard to get parts for it. They get shipped from Lebanon. Here, United States, it's really difficult. Aaron, what's the true review page for? I saw they delete every. Yeah, so I can tell you with absolute certainty that I have posted my negative or problems I've had with the device, and unfortunately, they will just delete that from their Facebook page. Um, it's kind of disconcerting for a company to remove positive and negative reviews, specifically negative reviews about a product, um, because people need to know the truth on how the system actually works. And unfortunately, they are not very transparent with how their device works and the issues that it has. So I'm going to tell you what I've experienced, and like I said, you guys can make your own determination whether or not you ever want to buy one. So again, get shipped from Lebanon. You know, that's where they're located. That's where the support is located. From what I've heard, that they are going to have a U.S. warehouse very soon. Um, that hopefully will help people if they need parts. I don't know. That's just something I heard. Um, when you get it, it's packaged really nice. They didn't, there's no problems with that. However, um, when you first put it together, it's very big. It's very hard to locate a spot for it. Um, I'm going to open up these photos again and show you where mine is located. I don't know if you guys actually saw it in the pictures earlier, um, but it is big. I believe it's about a foot and a few inches wide and roughly probably a foot deep, I would say, and maybe a foot tall. Um, it truly is gigantic. And the Trident is about a quarter of the size of this thing. So there it is. It's right up here. And you can see this is my water heater, so you can see how big this thing is. Um, it's big. So anyway, um, so again, we'll go over kind of everything. So put it together out of the box. You have to open up an app. I would say when I first got it working, it took me roughly an hour and a half, 2 hours to get the thing to connect to my internet, which is unbelievable when you consider you plug in the Trident, it just works. Um, Took me about an hour to get it all set up and running. Um, I initially put in a phosphate and nitrate test and was absolutely astonished that it takes an hour and a half to do a phosphate test and takes an hour and 15 minutes to do a nitrate test that I can do 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Um, so it takes an hour and a half to do the test. Now, a lot of you will say, okay, well, you're not testing phosphate 4 times a day like you are alkalinity, right? Okay, well, the alkalinity takes an hour to do. The calcium takes an hour to do. Any test you do with this thing takes roughly an hour. So if you need to know your alkalinity, well, you're going to be sitting there for an hour waiting. Um, I don't think that that's a good selling point, because the Trident takes 7 minutes to do a test. I think it's astonishing that this thing takes an hour and a half to do a test. Um, I then decided that I was going to try alkalinity with the device. So I put in Red Sea alkalinity, and the measurement was so off that I actually had to call up Reefbot or message them or whatever and say, this is ridiculous. It's saying my alkalinity is 12.5. There's no way my alkalinity is 12.5. So they did some weird calibration and then it went down to 10. And I was like, nope, it's not 10. It's about 8.5. I keep my tank at 8.5. And they said, no, there's nothing wrong. It's working perfectly fine. I said, no, it's not working perfectly fine. This went back and forth for about a month. I never got the alkalinity to work properly. Didn't even get it close to right. Um, and then every time it would test, it would be off by, you know, 3 DKH, 2 DKH. So uh, that's unacceptable for a device that costs $900. Um, so again, alkalinity terrible. Um, phosphate is the only thing that works, and I've tested this multiple times with the unit. The phosphate is dead on with any Hanna checker that I've done. So if you're going to get a $900 phosphate tester, this is the one to get. Um, the nitrate has been shoddy at best. It's been sometimes off by 20 to 30 to 40, which in nitrate is very important to know if you're running an SPS tank to know if your nitrate is 20. Um, so far, it's been decent. I switched over to Tropic Marin program testing, and it's been relatively good. Nitrate's not even close. I tried doing nitrate, sorry, and it keeps saying I have nitrate, and I keep testing it, and there's no nitrate. I decided I'm going to test ammonia on the Reefbot. Again, as I said earlier, I try out everything with the kit. If the kit says it's going to do ammonia, I'm going to test ammonia and see if they're BSing me that it works. So we'll go to ammonia, and I just want you to see a couple things here. So you will notice there are 3 tests here with the exact same color. And one of them says 0.25 and one of them says 0. So which one is correct? Right? So if you have a tank, you're running this unit and you're running it for ammonia. Again, I'm sure most people don't test ammonia, but again, for the sake of argument, you're running ammonia and you get the color that's exactly 0 and it says 0.25 ammonia. You'd be freaking out like I was. So they finally fixed it. It took months for them to realize that their unit was reading the wrong color and showing 0.25. So I just wanted you guys to see that. Same color, 0.25. One of the, and Peter mentioned this earlier, one of the biggest cons to this device is it runs off of a cloud. All of Apex can be run without Fusion. I don't know if people know that, but you don't have to run Fusion. Fusion is an optional piece of equipment that Apex uses. You can run your entire tank from the dashboard inside your house, no cloud. It'll work. Everything will work perfectly. The Reefbot, however, if it disconnects to the network, which it does quite often, it disconnects to the cloud. You cannot test. You cannot access the device. You cannot do anything. There is no dashboard that you locally sign in like I showed you earlier. It ceases to work, period. During Christmas, they decided that they were going to take their servers down. So for 3 days straight, this wasn't testing. Now, for some of you, you probably are saying, "Oh well, it's just I'll wait a week and it's no big deal." When you have 3 fish tanks and you have all this automation running and you're reliant on a device to work and work on a daily basis, especially when you're trying to fix a phosphate issue, which I was, and I was dosing phosphate, I needed to know what my phosphate was every single day. Again, most people, not going to be an issue. You're testing once a week, twice a month. But when you're reliant on a device to do something and it's not doing it, it's quite frustrating. So for that one reason, the fact that it connects to the cloud is the one reason I don't like the Reefbot and I don't recommend it to people because when their servers go down, which they do, I'm pretty confident they're located in Lebanon as well, the entire system stops working. This is something that they need to work on. This is something they need to fix. So unfortunately, I have been disappointed with the Reefbot as a whole, um, except for phosphate. It does a great job at testing phosphate, and it does it when it does it very well, and it's very accurate. Um, there have been complaints of needle inside bending. That happened twice to me. There's a needle that goes down into the liquid and it just bends. They finally have admitted to that. I don't think there's anyone that has had a Reefbot that hasn't had that issue. As Peter said, you have to replace the pump heads, which getting to the back of this unit and opening it up and changing everything is quite annoying, to say the least. Um, let's see. Um, I've heard of people having the thing start leaking for no reason. Um, all of these issues that I'm mentioning, by the way, I haven't heard from anyone with a Trident. I've heard of issues with the Trident, but they're not catastrophic issues like a leak or a flood, for instance, or things breaking all of a sudden. I have heard of people having Trident issues with the pump heads in the back, and of course, um, Neptune will send you new heads. You know, they'll send you a new Trident even. Yes, the white pill does jump out. That's another issue. There's a pill inside that mixes uh, the liquid and it jumps out. Therefore, it doesn't work anymore. Common issue. For the longest time, this website that I'm showing you would take between 15 seconds and 30 seconds to get to different portions. They finally updated their server, and it is actually much faster now. But this website I'm showing you and the app, which runs off of the same website, this would take literally 30 seconds to get to things. They did finally fix it, and I've been very happy with the speed of the unit. It's much faster now. Um, but for a long time, there was some problems. Um, so I'm not going to continue to explain all the issues I've had, but one of the issues which I have actually had discussions with multiple people with Reefbot, and I've had 50% tell me one thing and 50% tell me the other thing. I can tell you from my experience that their support is um, lacking. They take a significant amount of time to get back to you. Now, it could be that um, they don't like me. I don't know, but they don't get back to me. Whereas I'm hearing other people, they get back to them all the time, right away. Most of the responses that I've gotten from them, and I have actual documentation of it, is um, we'll get back to you, or we've not heard of this issue, we'll get back to you. And then I never hear from them. Um, Unfortunately, that's been my experience with the support from them. Um, the fact that they are indeed in Lebanon and we're here in the United States, there is a big disconnect in terms of getting support. I do notice a lot of people that are located in Europe, England, have a better support experience, and I think it's because they're in a closer time zone to Lebanon, so therefore they get the support that they need. But here in the United States, I think their support is lacking. So that's my opinion. Um, like I said, they do delete posts that have been negative towards them, which I don't think is a good business practice. I think that most companies will learn from issues that they're having. Unfortunately, this is not one of them. Um, as it stands, like I said, I use it for phosphate and I use it for nitrate. The phosphate test works great. As long as it's connected to the internet and as long as the server's running, I don't seem to have many issues with it. But anything outside of that, I would not recommend the unit. I would not recommend the unit to test calcium. I would not recommend the unit to test alkalinity or magnesium. I've heard a number of horror stories of people having issues where it doesn't read properly. The fact that this unit uses hobby grade test kits and not actual high grade test kits is also a problem. It's only as good as the test kit, and that's what they'll always tell you when you call support. Whereas Neptune has developed their own reagent and their own product that tests the three and is very accurate. They're not using hobby grade reagents. I can tell you from the price, they are not using, $10 Salifert tests to test their calcium. They are using a high grade reagent to test their calcium. Um, Many people will use test grade kits all the time and say, okay, well, that's fine with me. Unfortunately, when you put it into the bot, it can be all over the place, at least in my experience. And some people have had no issues with it. I've had tons of issues with it. Um, and it's possible that my bot is broken. You know, it's possible that there's a line of bots that have issues, and I have one of them. Because I hear other people that have absolutely no problems with their bot. Um, so it's hard to say. So anyway, any other questions about the Reefbot? Anything you want me to show you on the Reefbot um, while I'm discussing it? But we've been here an hour and 15 minutes. So if anybody has any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them. Any programming questions? Otherwise, I'm probably going to close it up here. And yeah, we'll try to have another one next Saturday. If you liked everything here, make sure you subscribe to my channel. Um, the more questions we can have, the more people we can have in here, the more experience everybody else will have. I try to show people as much programming as I can. But I think next week will be more of a programming stream. We'll find out. But thank you everybody for coming. I appreciate all the support. And again, if you ever have any questions, go to our Reef Automation Facebook page. It's just type in Reef Automation and join our Reef Automation page. I'll put it in the stream comments. And again, subscribe if you liked everything we discussed today. And we try to discuss a different topic every week. But thank you for coming, and you guys have a great weekend.